throughout the past couple of days, I've had a fair amount of conversations, so I feel pretty safe in making the assumption there's a lot of parents here in the crowd. We're going to play a little thought experiment. We're going to give our child a gift. That gift is their first public speech. But what we're trying to figure out is how many people should be in front of, how much notice should we give them, and what age should it be at? I don't have time to get all of your answers, but I'm going to tell you what my dad thought the answer should be. My dad thought I should speak in front of 400 people. I should find out 30 minutes before. And I'm 8 years old. That is the exact context of my first time I spoke in public. And it was as nerve-wracking as it sounds. But eventually, I made my way up to that stage, little paper shaking in hand, and I spoke. Those next 60 seconds flew by in a blur I quite obviously still remember to this day, because the praise that followed supplanted this belief, a belief that I was a pretty good public speaker. So for the rest of my life to this day, when there was an opportunity for someone to speak on behalf of a group, I was quick to raise my hand. But future-proof, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Was I actually any good? No. Well, I'll give you an example. When I was in middle school, this belief gave me the audacity to speak in front of our entire school. Well, I turned so red in the face, I earned a nickname. They called me the Kool-Aid Man. You want to talk about a hit to a kid's confidence? That was one. But that earlier belief shone brighter. I kind of ignored what happened there, and I kept finding these stages again and again, leading me to standing in front of you today. Future-proof, I'm Matt Mosich, and I'm an executive communication and speaker coach. That is fancy speak for I help the investment industry to take on conference stages like this, to give compelling investor presentations, and embrace what I call not public speaking, but high-pressure communication. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the 3 problems I see us facing in these high-pressure moments and provide you some tactical insight for you to take home and implement in your own lives. So what's that first problem that we face? The first problem is ourselves. We stand in our own way. 85% of people report feeling anxiety in these high-pressure moments. The other 15% aren't being challenged enough by what they're speaking or where they're speaking at, or they're liars. Now, why is that? Let's imagine 6,000 years ago, we're standing on a stage like this. We got 100 plus eyeballs on us. What's going through our mind? We might be about to get eaten. You see, we have these primitive instincts, these thoughts that still lie within us, even though the modern world doesn't present us with these same situations. And because of these primitive instincts, and because we're trying to evolve as humans, we've adopted thousands of techniques through the years, ways to counteract our anxious mind in these moments. Again, I don't have time to go through 1,000. I'm going to give you one. My favorite technique, one I use anytime I'm facing a high-pressure situation. It's called best case, worst case, most likely. 2021 was the most challenging year in my life. I was stuck in my head, filled with intrusive thoughts, often scared of myself. Fortunately, that pain led to me feeling like I needed to make a change, so eventually I sought out help. Throughout a couple therapy sessions, my therapist noticed a trend, and one day, as we were talking, going through a particularly difficult thought, she asked me to stop. She said, Matt, let's look at this thought. What are you so convinced is going to happen, and what might actually happen? I got her point. But then we went back to other sessions we'd had and other thoughts that I'd had, situations I was sure was going to happen and what actually happened. And that day she showed me that my intuition, my betting instinct, it wasn't all based in reality. So the next time that I faced one of these moments, these thoughts, these feelings, she asked me to stop it in advance and ask myself, what's the best case, what's the worst case, and what's the most likely? And through repetition of doing this, I'm actually able to see that worst case almost never happens. Even my best case can be exceeded. But let's zoom in a little bit further on this. What is anxiety? Anxiety is unfocused fear. So how do we counteract that? We focus it. The next thing I do, the most important part of this process, is staring that worst case scenario in the face and asking myself, what would I do if this happened, and actually playing it out. Through doing this, we focus our fear. We show ourselves the important things, which is our spouses are still going to love us, our parents are still going to love us, and ultimately we'll be okay. We'll even learn from this experience. So the first problem we face in these high-pressure settings, that's ourselves. And how I recommend we counteract that is by zooming in on our anxiety, focusing it, and playing out that worst-case scenario. The second problem we face in these settings is our message. 35 years ago, PowerPoint was created. 2,700 years ago, we adopted written language. 35,000 years ago, we began painting in caves, visual language. And 100,000 years ago, we adopted our language as we know it. Along with that, storytelling. I'm not here today to talk about PowerPoint. Storytelling is deeply rooted within our DNA. So much so that if you were to put two brains on a scan, someone living an experience in real time, and someone hearing a story of that experience, the scans are going to look almost identical. Because storytelling brings us into the moment, it helps us connect emotionally, and as much as we might think we make decisions logically, 90% of decisions are made based on emotion. So storytelling connects us, it helps us connect emotionally, it helps us make decisions. So we'll want to give some intention to this practice. But often when I begin talking about storytelling, I also hear a small groan. But Matt, I'm not a born storyteller. I want to counter that, because storytelling is a skill. And if you're not fully on board with me here, I do have some proof. On a July Southern California day, there sat this boy. And this boy was consumed with anxiety. You see, he had been invited to a pool party with the cool kids. The issue is, he knew every single one of them. Most of them had no clue who he was. So he arrives at this pool party, day turns to night, and he's painfully aware he's done nothing to up his social status. Eventually, though, everyone congregates around a bonfire and gets to sharing some stories, and he thinks, maybe this is my opportunity. So he waits, and he jumps in just when that time comes. But 30 seconds into his own story, he realizes eyes have glazed, heads have turned, and he pitters out mid-sentence. You know that expression, crickets? He could literally hear them. Suddenly, though, the group's leader chimes in with a story of his own. Throughout, the boy counts 6 bursts of laughter. Even in his state of anxiety, he can't help but laugh. The guy is that good. And to finish it all off, he ends with a punchline worthy of its own Netflix special. Later that night, the boy's driving home and sighs. If only I were a born storyteller. Now, some of you may be wondering, who's this Hollywood director? Who's this amazing storyteller developed from this story? Others of you may have guessed, I'm that boy. I spent 27 years convinced that I would never be an engaging storyteller. But 2 years ago, I read a book, some of you may have heard of it, it's called The 4 Agreements. And while reading that book, I was challenged to test some deeply rooted beliefs that had held me back. Storytelling being a skill was the first one that came to my mind. Since that day, since I began testing those beliefs, I've taken on these conference stages, given keynote presentations, and helped people build this storytelling practice as part of my business. To me, that feels like a skill that we can actually all adopt. I don't think I'm anything special. So storytelling is a skill. We're one step closer into that belief. But that idea itself isn't going to create stories for you. That's why I'm here to give you a framework, a means of crafting stories. I call it the path to storytelling. My third coaching client was someone who I never expected would come to me. He was a friend, someone who I looked up to a lot because he runs his own private equity fund, he's started a number of businesses, and he speaks with this impeccable certainty that you rarely see. So when he came to me, I was honored, but full of self-doubt. Because I was like, what do I have to offer him? But regardless, I decided, okay, I'm going to give it my all. And I dove straight in to reviewing what I could find. But 2 hours into reviewing his content, I was puzzled. I couldn't find anything that was notable, really worth what I thought he needed as a speaker. But I wouldn't be telling a story if I didn't find something. While he was on a podcast detailing his life's journey, going through a pivotal point in his life, going from all in on college sports, thinking he was going to go pro, to all in on business in a matter of 2 days. The host gives him a weird look, sits back and says, "Well, it doesn't seem like it was that hard for you." To which my friend says, "Well, yeah, it was," and then just bulldozes on his way. And it was then I realized I didn't believe him. And because I couldn't relate to him, how could he motivate me? So the next time we got together, I showed him this path. Point, tell them what you're going to tell them, but also what are you going to prove to them? Arena, set the stage, who, where, and when. Trials, share the challenge, the pain, the opportunity that compels you to act. I see it a lot in C-suite level execs. They shy away from sharing these experiences. But what it actually shows is you're human, that you too have actually overcame these challenges, and it brings people in. Share them. And then finally, H, the horizons, the lesson learned, what you carry with you to this day because of that experience. So the second problem we face in these high-pressure settings is our message. And there's no more powerful way for us to connect than to share stories. And finally, that third problem that we face is our delivery. There was this Harvard professor. He was curious. After years of lecturing, being a keynote speaker himself, he wasn't quite sure what makes a speaker compelling. He asked his students, and they said when someone shows us an idea, it tells us that we can do something we previously didn't believe. He asked his faculty, and they said when someone gives us a new way of understanding something, a new means of framing a topic. But underlying each of them was a common theme. They were all drawn towards someone who is obviously passionate about what they do. Now, wealth managers, maybe we don't all feel this way, but often when I express, let's bring passion in, I also hear another groan. What I do isn't that exciting. Maybe, but maybe not. Back in May, I met with a VP of sales at a construction services firm. They came to me, they're speaking on these conference stages again and again, and they thought there was some opportunity there. I hadn't met them quite yet. On our first call, I just asked them, tell me a little bit more about what you do. Their words, not mine. We just help construction companies process paperwork. That wasn't getting me excited. And more importantly, I could tell it wasn't getting her excited. So I sat back, I thought, and then I asked her, well, what excites you about what you do? And I could hear a smile begin to build across the phone as she explained. Well, you see, when these construction companies that come to us, it's because they're spending tens of hours bogged down with this paperwork, not focusing on their best task. But two, what's made me the most excited is how many times we've actually been told that we've helped marriages. Because without us, these construction companies are often family-run, and they pass off this work to the spouse. That's when a smile crossed my face as I explained, that's what you talk about, and that's where you speak from. When we think of passion, we might think of going to Mars. We might think of saving lives. We might think of a speaker on stage doing cartwheels. And I am not going to embarrass myself enough to make you laugh to let you see my cartwheel. Because that's also not what passion really is. Passion is a feeling, it's a belief in what you're doing. It's a feeling you get when you wake up and you see your spouse in the morning. It's that feeling you get when a client calls you and says you have helped them achieve their financial goals. It's that lust for sleep that you get when you're months into having a newborn. You see, Passion isn't reserved for certain people. It's within each and every one of us, but it requires us to ask the right questions. Questions like, why do I do what I do? How do I help people? And what excites me about what I do? So the third problem we face in these settings is our delivery. And there's no more compelling way that we can bring people into our message than expressing an obvious passion for our work. Whether it's a conference stage, a boardroom, a difficult conversation with a friend, with a spouse, these high-pressure settings, they surround us. And if we want to become excellent, compelling, high-pressure communicators, public speakers, we're going to need to get out of our own way. We're going to need to deliver compelling messages using stories and bring that passion in to everything that we do. Now, the other day, Jackie Stanton was on a panel, and she said something that resonated a lot with me. She mentioned that in any of these talks, us speakers were hopeful to get about 10% across to you all. And there's one thing that's been underlying these messages I really want to express, the one thing I would ask you to take away from what we've talked about here today, which is deeply rooted beliefs are very, very hard to change. You see, my deeply rooted belief around these stages was that I was great. But as I gave you a little context, I definitely was not. But it was that belief that ultimately allowed me to keep giving myself opportunities, to keep practicing, and ultimately to stand in front of you today. But I'm not trying to pump myself up, because I had so many other beliefs that held me back throughout my whole life that I've only began to test, I've only began to shape, because I began asking myself the right questions. Too often when we're thinking about these moments, these stages, we think, can I embrace these moments? Can I tell compelling stories? Can I find passion in what I do? And we can simply change that message with one word. How can I embrace these moments? How can I tell compelling stories? How can I find passion, or my passion, for what I do? Future Proof, it's been my honor. Kool-Aid Man, out.